Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, spoiler review. It's been a month. I know. I don't care. We're going to talk about it. So, let's talk about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I'm okay. I'm looking at the images now. I'm tempted to start out with Wanda, but I'm going to save my thoughts on Wanda just a second because that's going to be a whole soapbox onto itself. So let's just sort of give some general thoughts on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. What did I think about the movie? Obviously, if you've been following on the community tab at all on my YouTube channel, you'll know that I actually did enjoy the movie quite a bit. Actually, and I've had some time. Obviously, it's been about a month since the movie came out. I've had some time to really kind of think about my thoughts and kind of think about what this movie is and where it kind of stands in the MCU. I'll tell you right now that in my rankings, which I update usually right after I see the movie and then kind of let it marinate and maybe change it up a little bit over the next coming days. And right now, it is very firmly in the middle, right? It's, out of the 35 some projects that have come out of the MCU, it's in the middle. And, the first Doctor Strange is also sort of towards the middle. And I don't think it's because these two movies are bad, necessarily. I just think that they're not as good as they could be, which is fine. We don't need the next, I don't know. We don't need the next Citizen Kane to be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's fine. We don't need the next Infinity War to be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But it just means that it's, in my opinion, a good movie. And maybe not a great one. And that's totally fine. So let's start out with talking about the three characters on the screen right now, from left to right. America Chavez, I think, is an interesting character. I think Xochitl Gomez plays her really, really well, and she's pretty charismatic throughout the film. I think that her backstory is really interesting. Sort of, where did she come from? What's the deal with her mothers? Where did she get her powers? A lot of people actually talked about how ridiculous it was that the bee kind of was the trigger for her powers. And maybe this is just personally, just a subjective thing. As somebody who was terrified of bees myself, I actually kind of bought that explanation, to be honest. Like, I would have reacted in a very similar way and probably unleashed my own powers if I had any. So, again, that's just a personal thing, but it didn't bother me. And that's, again, opinions about movies and things are subjective. So, there you go. I think that her powers will be interesting going forward. Obviously, she's being set up to be such an important figure in the MCU, being able to open and close portals into the multiverse and all that sort of stuff, which is interesting. I don't know if that's going to make her completely overpowered as we get along into the MCU, and she's going to have to eventually be nerfed or something like that. She's also training to be a sorcerer. Ned Leeds, by the way, it has you beat America because he's just opening portals left and right, and you're struggling at the end of this movie to open a portal, so there's that. But overall, I think that she is a good character. I don't think we saw nearly enough of her to kind of make a decision about, what we think about her overall. But I will say that, baseline fundamentally, Xochitl Gomez is a great actress. She did a great job. And I think that the character moving forward will have a lot of important things to do throughout the MCU phases 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it may be. Sorry, I just had to address something really quick. Okay, the next character up here is Wong. Wong is, let's be clear. Benedict Wong is always great in these movies. And really, Phase 4 is really becoming the MCU, or what did he call it? The Wong Cinematic Universe, because he's been in Shang-Chi, he's been in Doctor Strange 2, he's been in Spider-Man No Way Home, he's going to be in She-Hulk. And I think that Benedict Wong is always great in whatever he does. I don't think he was given a lot to do in this movie, to be quite honest. Obviously he was captured for a bit, and then he went up to the castle, which I am totally blanking on the name of it right now. I would have totally lost on that, and if that was a trivia question, Winder something. Anyways, I'm gonna embarrass myself if I keep trying that. So I think he was good. He was good as always, and he's always fun to see. I also really like that he's the Sorcerer Supreme. I don't think that'll last, obviously, and I really hope that doesn't mean he's going to die in the next film that he shows up in. I don't think he's going to die in She-Hulk, obviously, but the next film that he shows up in, because I think that obviously Stephen Strange is Sorcerer Supreme, and they can't really have him just not be the Sorcerer Supreme for too much longer. But I do like that the dynamic of him and Strange towards the end, of just the respect that they have for one another, I think is great. Stephen Strange himself, I think is good. I think Benedict Cumberbatch is always good in the role, and he gets to play a lot of different versions of himself, which is fun. Um, that being said, I don't necessarily think this is his strongest outing, and that's why we'll get to that in just a second. With nope, I keep doing that. Where is it? There we go. With the post-credit scene, but I don't know how excited I am for Doctor Strange 3, to be quite honest. I'm very excited to see Doctor Strange again in the role, and I think that has everything to do with Benedict Cumberbatch. But I did mean to go back up this time. I don't think that Doctor Strange himself, I don't know that I'm as endeared to him as a character on his own anymore. I think the first Doctor Strange film did a really good job. I don't know that I'm really excited to see a Doctor Strange 3 at this point in time. That might just be me. They might have some crazy concept, bring in Nightmare, bring in Clea, and do all that sort of stuff. We'll just have to see about that. But speaking of the villains, potential villains, let's talk about Scarlet Witch. I know that this has been a debate that's probably about dead by now. But I'm going to give my thoughts anyways, because this is my channel and I get to do that. So, Wanda Maximoff. Was her villain turn in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness warranted? I'm going to say absolutely. Now, I understand. As somebody who really, really loves the character of Wanda Maximoff and really, really loves WandaVision. I mean, really loves WandaVision. I understand people being upset that she's a villain. I understand, even I myself was upset that she was a villain just because I liked the character so much, and seeing her do all these horrific things was not easy to see. But in terms of character development, this makes sense to me. And this, I don't want to open up the Last Jedi can of worms. I will. Just for a tiny second. I don't quite understand why fandoms in general these days have such a hard time grasping that people can change. Like, people have the ability to change. It's very baffling to me, honestly. With Luke in The Last Jedi, kind of thinking about how it's been 30 years since Return of the Jedi. And of course that's not the same Luke that you saw, given that everything he's gone through since Return of the Jedi. Of course it's not the same Luke. Now, Wanda's a little different, obviously. It's only been a couple of years. You kind of see the end of WandaVision, but I still think WandaVision set everything up that it needed, that needed to kind of go into Doctor Strange 2. And here's why. At the end of WandaVision is a story about grief and about the acceptance of grief and kind of letting go of past trauma and things like that. And I think it did that beautifully. Grief, though, is not something that just goes away. You have to understand. It's not something that just dies because you accepted it. And, like, even if you go through the 5 stages, it's like, it's not just over. So while I understand the argument of like, oh, she completed her arc in WandaVision, she's still going to grieve the loss of Vision and her kids. Now, Vision not being in Doctor Strange 2 is a I don't know if it's a plot hole, but just sort of a thing that I accept as well. I don't know where Vision was. I think that White Vision needed to show up, or at least a multiverse Vision needed to show up to kind of, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me either. So I'll give everybody that. But the kids, I think that at the end of WandaVision, we see her in the cabin, we see her experimenting with the Darkhold, and we see that while she has sort of accepted that, I don't know, that her Westview experiment was sort of not the most ideal way to go about, there is another way to get her kids. And that temptation creeps back into her mind. We know that the Darkhold is a corrupting power. That is sort of a writing cop-out. I'll give it that as well. It's like, yeah, I mean, she's being corrupted by the dark side or whatever. Like, fine, that's not the cleanest and most, or that is one of the more squeaky clean ways to kind of turn a good character evil. But all that to say is that everything you need to have Scarlet Witch be the villain is set up, I believe, at the end of WandaVision. Plus, and I also understand this is not explicitly said in Doctor Strange 2, it has been some time since the end of WandaVision. So it's not like the next day after Westview, she turns into this scary, evil Scarlet Witch. But which, by the way, Elizabeth Olsen gives just a tremendous performance. She just gives one of the best MCU performances I have ever seen. Wow, she is scary, she is terrifying, and she is probably one of the best MCU villains I've ever seen, honestly. I think she ranks right up there in tier 1. I'm just going to say it. You may disagree. That's totally fine. I think she ranks right up there with Thanos, Killmonger, Vulture, Wenwu, Green Goblin probably. She's right there. But to have that, to have that understanding that it's been a couple of years, she's been experimenting with the Darkhold, and now she realizes that she has a way to get her kids back, it just makes sense to me. And then to have this really satisfying, to me, now we'll talk about the writing in just a second, but to me, to have this really satisfying narrative arc of, at the end of the movie, kind of realizing that how far she has gone to get her kids and that her kids are scared of her now. It's just, it's satisfying to me, And I think that honestly, as much as I love the character of Scarlet Witch and as much as I love Elizabeth Olsen in the role, I think she should remain dead. I think that the character has gone through enough. I think we've done just about everything we could have with this character. I think she should remain dead. I know they won't. They're going to bring her back, but I think she should remain dead. And I think that because I like Elizabeth Olsen's turn as the villain so much is probably why I like the movie. I'm one of those people who like the movie, which I understand that there are people who don't. On the other side, that's okay. But I think a lot of it hinges on what you think about Elizabeth Olsen. Now, let's talk about. I did that again. I need to stop doing that. Let's talk about the Sam Raimi-isms, if you will, and then we'll get to the Illuminati, and we'll talk about the post-credit scene, and we will move right along. Sam Raimi really put a stamp on this movie, and I think for the better. Some of the imagery in this movie, especially with the Illuminati, obviously, was just terrifying. With the way that Black Bolt died, the way that Mr. Fantastic died, and just some of the Scarlet Witch imagery with the oil on her face as she's walking through the hallways and just ripping Ultron bot heads apart. It's just like scary stuff, I also I'm one of those people who really love the music fight. As somebody who's played music before, I think it's just super cool, the way that they did that. And I love the zombie strange at the end. I think that sometimes I do concur that when he's sort of giving that emotional speech to America Chavez and he's in the zombie form, it kind of looks really silly and really dumb. Yeah, it looks a little cartoonish, but at the end of the day, it didn't really ruin it for me. And I think that Sam Raimi really made his definitive mark on this movie, and I think it's all the better for it, honestly. I do. Now, understanding that there are different so on the one hand, understanding that there are different teams that make these movies and shows, but also understanding that Michael Waldron wrote Loki and then wrote Doctor Strange 2, it's a bit bizarre how this is all not seemingly connecting together. Kevin Feige came out on the red carpet and said, it's because of Sylvie and Loki that these things could happen, but it's not been made clear. It's a growing problem with the MCU of how they're dealing with continuity, and also with Star Wars even. We'll talk about that with Obi-Wan. But yeah, it's something to keep an eye out on, because if the multiverse is really going to be this important, it's getting very hard to follow. But anyways, I think that going through the different universes and really sticking with Earth 838, I think that people had this problem of why didn't you go to 70 different universes? I think that grounding it in one or two actually made the story a little bit stronger. And I wasn't that upset about the fact that they didn't go to 70 billion different universes at once. Though I think that the sequence of them traveling through the multiverse could have been explored a little bit more. But at any rate. I think that Sam Raimi, given that he had to come in not last minute, but pretty close to the end of pre-production, just did a really great job. Now let's talk about the big thing in this movie, which is the Illuminati. And let's talk about just cameos in general. I was very worried going into this movie that it would just be cameo central, that this movie would just be cameo after cameo after cameo, and that it would just be about who shows up next. And look, I love a good cameo as much as the next person. I think, though, Spider-Man Far From Home is one of the strongest, and you'll see why this is related in just a second. Spider-Man Far From Home, to me, is one of the greatest MCU movies that have ever been made. I think it's a top 10, easily. I think it's top 5 even. I don't remember, honestly, my own rankings. But the reason it's so great, it doesn't have any cameos in it. I mean, until the very end with Talos and Soren. It doesn't have cameos. It's just a good movie. And, honestly, I think the MCU and Star Wars as well have just kind of gotten away from that whole idea of, like, let's make a good movie first before just putting in a bunch of these cameos, like Book of Boba Fett. Like, oh, we forgot that Boba Fett's in his own show because we had Luke Skywalker in there, so people won't notice. Well, we noticed. But anyways, so I was worried about that. We heard Professor X in the trailer. Here's his hand. I couldn't really find a picture of him. Anyways, where's it going with that? Oh yeah, Professor X. So we saw Professor X in the trailer, and that just really made me worry because it was like, okay, if they're revealing Professor X, it's like, oh man, like how many actual cameos do they have? Turns out 5, and they were all part of one team. So we had, Black Bolt. We had Anson Mount playing Black Bolt again from the Inhuman show that bombed. We had Lashana Lynch playing Maria Rambeau's Captain Marvel. Haley Atwell playing Captain Carter. Patrick Stewart reprising his role as Charles Xavier. And, of course, we had the one and only Jim Halpert, John Krasinski, playing Mr. Fantastic. And the fact that they were all part of one team, the Illuminati in Earth's 818's universe, that they all served a purpose in the story, and they weren't just there. Like, they didn't just show up. Apologies if you can hear that noise, by the way, outside. Like I said, we're just going with it, so apologies for that. But, if the fact that they actually had some narrative purpose in the story and just some reason to be there, and that they worked in the story, and they were great, and they were fun, and it wasn't just cameos for the sake of cameos, I was just beyond happy. I think that this is how you do cameos. Spider-Man No Way Home also, but those weren't even cameos, like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were in the movies for 30 minutes. So like I said, cameos for cameo's sake it's so dangerous. And I hope that these movies do not stray towards that sort of idea of let's just put in random people that we've seen, like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, which I would have loved to have seen, by the way, but he did not fit in this movie at all. Like, if Hugh Jackman's Wolverine was in the Illuminati, I would have been so confused because he does not fit there. Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool doesn't fit in this movie. I mean, he could have if they rewrote some things, but it doesn't make sense narratively, and so I'm really glad about that. So yeah, the movie wraps up. They fight. Zombie Strange fights and all that sort of stuff. And where's Zombie Strange? There's Zombie Strange. And then we get the post-credit scenes. And to be honest, this is one of the most lackluster post-credit scenes I've ever seen in an MCU movie. Not the Bruce Campbell one. And actually, I've heard that the Bruce Campbell one was more polarizing than this one. I think the Bruce Campbell one was actually hilarious, to be quite honest. I kind of understand. No, I do understand why a lot of people didn't like that one. Because it was kind of like, oh, you made us stay through the credits and stuff. You're not obligated to stay through the credits, though. And I find it kind of hilarious because it's like 5 to 10 minutes. And I guess like people have places to be, but if 5 to 10 minutes is gonna like kill your day, I don't know. I really don't know, because I think it was funny, and even if it was kind of a waste, it was like funny. Anyways, we're not here to talk about the Bruce Campbell post-credits scene. We're here to talk about the other one with Charlize Theron and Theron, I don't know, and Third Eye Strange. I hate Third Eye. I think it looks dumb. I think it is dumb. I hope they get rid of it, like Thor's missing eye. Ironically, eyes everywhere. I think it looks really dumb. Clea, fine, sure. Dark Dimension, sure. Incursion set up for, Secret Wars or whatever. It's fine. It's whatever. But I don't care as much. And I don't know why that is, honestly. I just find myself not really caring about it, And I don't know whether or not that's because of this movie, or if I just saw this scene regardless and saw it attached to a different movie altogether, if that would have been the case. I just don't really care all that much. about all this sort of stuff. And that's sort of the problem, because the more that I think about this movie, the more I equate it to Avengers Age of Ultron. When that movie came out, we all wanted to love it as much as we did the first Avengers. We all wanted to love this movie as much as Spider-Man No Way Home or Doctor Strange 1 for most of us. And it wasn't as good, you know? And that's fine. I mean, granted, I know a lot of people, or I don't know a lot of people, but I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who love this movie more than Spider-Man No Way Home, and love Avengers Age of Ultron more than they love the first Avengers. That's totally fine. I'm just saying for most of us, I don't think that's the case. And another thing, too, is that these two movies seem to be linchpins to setting up future things in the MCU. They seem to serve a similar purpose. Not that this movie was just full of setup. I think that this movie had more of a self-contained, well-told narrative. I think some of the writing in this movie is horrifically bad. I don't know. I just don't understand why we're saying the themes of the movie out loud just at every single juncture, like asking Stephen Strange, at the three acts, like the first act break and the second act break, and then at the end of the movie, are you happy? And like Christine Palmer just giving him the speech at the end of the movie about, where they are in their lives and what she means to him. I just think that the writing might have been one of the key things that made this movie a little bit lackluster. And I don't know if that lends to this post-credit scene being less interesting, but I just really don't see myself as interested in the future of the MCU. Just like how after Age of Ultron, I wasn't super interested in Thor's quest to find Infinity Stones. And hopefully, just like with Age of Ultron, afterwards, with subsequent movies, they'll get me back invested in the overall story, just like they did with the Infinity Stones, and we'll be back on board with the multiverse at some point in the near future. So, I think that the more I think about this movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, it is very much akin to Avengers Age of Ultron. It is sort of a good, not great story, with a lot of characters, a lot of things going on, some kind of clunky writing, some clunky characters, some clunky things, but some great things, like a great villain in Scarlet Witch, in my opinion. Another great performance by Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. It's always just good to see how inventive his magic can get with the music and with the giant monsters and things like that. And it's a movie that I'll probably see again, when it comes out on Disney Plus in just a few weeks. And then I'll probably not see it again until I just, I do my full rewatches, which, oh man, just thinking about watching 50 MCU projects is, oh man, it's crazy. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.